Hello everyone, welcome to the Planet Positive Beauty discussion. I'm Lisa Oxenham, the Beauty and Style Director of Marie Claire, and I'm also on the advisory board for the Sustainable Beauty Coalition. Now, this talk is an extension of the Sustainable Beauty Coalition's Positive Planet Beauty Guide. So we'll be talking about the shopper's demand for transparency and how we move forward collectively with a whole spectrum of organisations, brands and logos, because we're stronger together. We all have our own unique areas of expertise and coming together benefits everyone. So we're looking at different ways of leveraging it all. So we take sustainability in the beauty industry to the next level. So firstly, if the panelists can introduce themselves, please. So Sean, starting with you.
Hi, my name is Sean Russell. I'm the founder of Copenhagen-based fragrance brand Scandinavisk, and I'm also the chair of the supervisory board of the Corp Beauty Coalition.
Hi, I'm Jane Sterland. I'm country manager for a natural and organic company called Valeda, and I'm also working for the British Beauty Council, where I'm chair of the Sustainable Beauty Coalition.
Jessie.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessie Baker, founder and CEO at Provenance. Our job at Provenance is to power sustainability claims you can trust, and we're proud to be working with over 160 different beauty brands and retailers to enable consistent, credible transparency. We're also a very proud B Corp, and I'm really happy to be part of the advisory board for the Sustainable Beauty Coalition also.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So firstly, let's set the scene for sustainable beauty. Jane, can you give us a brief overview of the last 10 years?
Oh, yes, just in a few moments. Well, if you go back 10 years, sustainable beauty really wasn't a thing. We talked a lot about natural beauty, and that was really the buzzword. And over time, we've realized that it's just not right just to say natural beauty, because we have to look at the whole supply chain, everything that we do within a business, and we've all done that. We know that we're in a climate emergency, which is great news. So sustainability has now become, if you like, the new buzzword, natural and organic. And what we've seen over the last few years is a push from government about things about plastic packaging. I'm sure we'll talk about plastic packaging tax. We've already talked about B Corp, and B Corp is the global standard for building sustainability into your business in the form of measurement and an external accreditation. But in a nutshell, I would say we're now looking at beauty to be completely sustainable, and for its impact on the planet to go from being negative to positive. And to put that into context, bluntly, I don't think any brand globally can claim that today. We've got a lot of work to do, but there is some amazing work happening, and we as an industry need to share that amazing work, because we'll get there together. One person, one brand can't do it on their own.
Yeah, exactly. Sean, why are you finding the pace of change so frustrating?
Well, I think to Jane's point, one brand can't do it on their own. And that was a realization amongst 7 B Corps really at the beginning of last year, 2021, where, despite our respective solo efforts to make change ourselves and then hopefully influence change in the broader industry, we just didn't really see that happening. So we decided to form a collective action initiative, a coalition of the willing, if you will. And what started as 7 B Corps in the spring of 2021 is now more than 50 B Corps in the beauty space across all continents, with millions of customers and tens of thousands of staff determined to work together to influence change in the beauty industry for good.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And Jane, what does sustainability mean in 2022, and what we're actually honing in on this year?
So if you were to ask me that last year, I would say it's all about carbon. The buzzword is carbon. We had COP26 in Glasgow, a lot of talk about carbon emissions, a lot of talk about not just our own carbon in terms of the way we produce products, but also scope 3, which basically means when we use products, what carbon are we emitting to make those products? But now it's way more complicated, because we are also bringing people and animals and biodiversity into that conversation, which is amazing. It's exactly what we should be talking about. So when I use the term nature, I'm talking about the whole of life on Earth. So it's not just about raw ingredients and how we grow them, but it's actually about how we treat our people. You know, do we pay a living wage? How do we source our raw ingredients? So there's a very strong people element. There's also biodiversity. So when you're sourcing a product, what's happening to the biodiversity in that region? You know, I can talk about palm oil. Palm oil is a huge ingredient in beauty. You know, what's happening to the orangutans because of the rainforests that are being cut down? So the word I would choose is holistic. We have to have a holistic view of nature and not just pick out, you know, the buzzword, which is carbon, or what are we going to do about plastic, but actually see the whole thing in its entirety, which means actually it's quite complicated. And there's lots of buzzwords out there. You know, we're using plastic that's been harvested from the ocean, you know, taken out of the ocean. Well, that's great, but that's just one lens. So I think as brands, so much greenwashing, we really have to not try to pretend that any one of us is greener than another, because quite frankly, we've all got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we'll come on to greenwashing a bit later in the talk. So Jessie, how can a conscious citizen navigate the beauty industry and find products that match their values?
Sure. So as Jane said, it's incredibly difficult. Sustainability is a complex topic and our values are broad, from caring about who the owner or founder of the business is, to carbon, to packaging, and it shouldn't be guesswork to shop in line with your values. So, you know, this is very much at kind of the heart of why I started Provenance. I wanted to find easy, trustworthy information on the social and environmental impact of products. So yeah, I guess one way is engaging with what we're doing at Provenance and helping to enable brands to make consistent, credible claims inside their own brand websites and inside retail websites, so that we don't need a PhD in sustainability every time we go shopping, and we don't need to learn a whole new kind of language depending on what brand we're navigating. And then so the work we're doing at Provenance really embraces a lot of the leading standards that we should be looking out for as shoppers. So that's B Corp, that's Soil Association Organic, and many other kind of leading standards that really should be something shoppers are looking out for.
Mm-hmm. And can you just tell us a bit about the importance of certifications and the evidence to back claims?
Definitely. This is incredibly important. I think, you know, if a brand just makes a claim about themselves or a product, it's just the brand's word for it, really. They could be marking their own homework. So it's really important that brands seek to meet industry leading standards rather than setting their own standards. And the easiest way to do that is really to collaborate with existing certifications or standard setters. And kind of follow their programs. It's tricky because not all are as good as each other. So trying to navigate that landscape and find the right ones can be a challenge for brands. But there are a really fantastic set out there that the brands can engage with. However, I would make a note that as a smaller brand, sometimes that can be quite challenging. Certifications are not free. And so that's where at Provenance, we really recommend that you really use transparency and sharing evidence to support your claims as kind of your first step. And then as soon as you possibly can, try and enable those claims to be verified and connect with the certifications that you can afford. Yeah,
thanks, Jessie. Sean, do you want to give us a definition of B Corp? What is B Corp?
Yeah, well, it's I think pretty much the only certification that is a complete company certification of your entire social and environmental impact. So unlike many other certifications in the beauty industry, for example, which typically might be based on formulation or packaging or sourcing policies or what's not inside the product, this is a detailed breakdown of the effect of the company's decisions on its people, its customers, on its community, on its suppliers, and the environment that surrounds us all. So really, there's really no stone unturned. It's a complete X-ray of all companies' actions. And that's why we, as a small company, to Jessie's point, we wanted to choose only one certification. For all the reasons she mentioned, it was the most obvious one and the highest bar for us to actually meet.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. And as well as the logos, Jessie, how can brands help conscious shoppers find the information they need?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work to do there as well. I think, so first of all, it's about presenting this information consistently and credibly. So we do need to bring the logos to the fore, but it's really important that we show kind of what they mean. Even something like B Corp, it's become a lot more popular, and I think some people understand it, but lots of people don't. So I think it's really important that brands also share kind of what that means, you know, make those certifications clickable so that people can understand kind of the standard they're meeting. But also I think it's important that we go far beyond just a certification or two and making claims. I think it's really important that brands weave sustainability and transparency into their marketing. So, you know, showing the supply chain and factories and how things are made while they're marketing products, I think is really, really powerful and is a huge step in educating consumers as well on these issues. So yeah, I think turning to social media, using your Insta Live, not just to demo your products, but also to show more information about the ingredients and stories is a really powerful thing that brands can do to kind of really help understand like all of that effort that's gone into improving those products.
Yeah, I totally agree. Another area that's very great is organic versus natural terminology. Jane, what does it all mean and how can we define them?
That's such a great question. Now, if you were to buy organic food or a bottle of organic milk, it has to be organic because the regulations right across Europe say it has to be organic. But if you buy a beauty product that says it's natural and organic, it can just have 1 or 2% that is natural and organic. In fact, we've got some brands in the marketplace that have organic in their name, but quite frankly, you'd need a microscope to find which ingredient is actually organic. So that's when we talked about greenwashing. So what does greenwashing mean as a term? So greenwashing means pretending to be more natural than you actually are. And our industry is rife with it. So just going back to basics, the majority of ingredients, I would say at least 90%, possibly even more than that, in terms of volume that goes into beauty products is what we call conventional or from synthetic origin. So it's effectively made from petrochemicals originally. Some of it's now made artificially effectively in the lab. If it is grown in a field and you recognize that it's farmed, and I've already mentioned about palm oil, not grown in a field, but you know, it comes from nature, then you can use the term natural. But then if you over process it, so a good example of that is sodium bicarb or zinc oxide that you find in a nappy cream, that becomes naturally derived. It's not natural, it's naturally derived. It's been over processed. So straight away you're thinking, well, it's a bit complicated. Is it natural or is it not natural? Then you get into organic. For you to claim organic, it has to be grown without any artificial fertilizers or herbicides or insecticides. And those rules are very strict. And that does have to be certified from its production point of view.
Yeah.
So whilst you say I'm using maybe an organic sunflower oil, that's great, because that has to come with a certification. So it's a natural based product that's been grown without anything artificial being added to it. But then you can claim that product is organic because that's the bit that we don't have the definition for. And also, to make it even more complicated, there's different grades of organic farming. So at Weleda, we farm biodynamically, which is like super organic. So we say that we will only grow those plant-based ingredients using what we have within that natural environment. So even copper sulfate, which is often used in organic farming, we don't use that because it's not a natural, it's not naturally there in our gardens. So we really need this external certification and the proof pointing that Jessie's talking about, where we have external bodies actually saying this is certified natural. So we mentioned Soil Association and Cosmos is another standard. Natru is another international standard. These third-party verifications are super important for us as an industry, because we do have to clean up our act. That's really, really important. And what gets my goat is when I go into store, or I even listen to a buyer talking about, well, isn't this great? It's 97% natural. And I'm like, but when you think in a product, 80% of the ingredients could be water, actually that 3% is quite big. And what is it? Is it a paraben? Is it something you really don't want to be going anywhere near your skin or your baby's skin? So a lot of work for us as an industry to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That was really clear. And Sean, you were saying that there's an assumption that natural or nature is always always good.
Natural is always good, yes. For some apparent reason, it's something that people hang belief on. But to Jane's point, not necessarily. If it's irresponsibly farmed, if it's pesticides and fertilizers being used, if you were consciously aware of that, would you actually choose to buy that 99% natural product? I think it's unlikely. But because there's simply no regulation on these claims, it enables brands really to use freely the words natural and organic without any apparent oversight. If some brands do choose the certifications that Jane mentions, they are optional ultimately, so they're not obliged. So unlike that green organic apple in the supermarket, which is 100% organically farmed and regulated, we just don't have that here. And I think a lot of the challenge that we face is to try to influence embedded perceptions on the meaning of critical words in our industry, whether it be natural, organic, consumer, beauty. All of these have definitions right now that need to change. Take consumer and beauty. The beauty consumer itself, for me, if I read that now, it's consuming the beauty of this earth for one's own personal benefit. That's not what any of us want to do here on this panel. We want to benefit from the beauty of earth, from nature, to enjoy our own beauty products. And we also want to avoid being perceived as consumers who are simply put on this planet to ultimately destroy. We would far rather consider ourselves as citizens. In fact, the original definition of the word citizen is simply the two words people together, or together people. And I think if we can think of ourselves as citizens who benefit from society in the earth and in return benefit back, and if we can think of beauty with its broader meaning, which is actually about the beauty of the earth and not just the beauty of the end user, if we can try and find a way to influence those perceptions, we'll be a long way down the line compared to the last 100 years.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Sean. Thank you. And in what ways now is legislation cracking down on greenwashing? So you've got the FTC Green Guides, the CMA, Green Claims Code. Jessie, can you give an overview of what's going on and what it means for brands and the shoppers and the implications?
Absolutely. And like what Sean says really resonates with me. Like there needs to be a huge change. The industry absolutely needs to completely reposition how we talk about beauty and our role in that industry. But we can't do that just relying on business. I do think it's important that we get governance and not-for-profits involved in helping to set guidance so that we can accelerate the change. And that's exactly what's going on. So the Competition Markets Authority did a study in 2021, and they saw that 40% of green claims were misleading, and recognized it as a huge priority for them to help get industry to a level where greenwashing could be drastically reduced. So the Competition Markets Authority has been fantastic at leading the way here with their Green Claims Code. There's kind of three key aspects to this. One is helping to prove claims are, as essentially every claim you're making needs to be clear, proven, and contain the kind of relevant evidence for shoppers to access. You need to use shopper-friendly language, so it's really clear kind of what claim you're making. And they really impress on the use of industry certifications rather than avoiding kind of self-accreditation. So I think it's a really successful initiative. It's really helped brands sit up and take notice, and it's also empowered shoppers and also journalists to be able to call out brands that really are misleading customers or not doing enough to substantiate the marketing claims they're making. And there's been some great stuff in the news. So we saw Bondi Sands got called out for their coral reef safe sun cream not being up to scratch. Head and Shoulders got called out for talking about recyclability when in fact a whole part of the product packaging wasn't recyclable. So yeah, we're definitely seeing this playing out, and I think we'll only see more.
Yeah, really good news. So where is the right place for all of this information to live? Jane, perhaps the Sustainable Beauty Coalition is the right hub to bring together these bodies and information and making it accessible to shoppers?
Yes, absolutely, Lisa. So we formed the Sustainable Beauty Coalition after the British Beauty Council created a white paper looking at the impact of beauty on the planet. And what can we do? Where do we need to concentrate? And the first thing we did was we pulled together some amazing people from the beauty industry, and we started talking about what's the first thing that we need to do. And we realized that we couldn't even agree amongst ourselves what the terms were. You know, what is vegan beauty, clean beauty, organic, natural? And so we said, well, if we can't work it out, how on earth can the end user, the citizen, Sean, how can they really work it out? So we've created the Planet Positive Beauty Guide, and it's in its 2nd edition, and it will go through many iterations and editions to try to keep up to date with a very quickly evolving industry. You'll find it on the British Beauty Council website. We launch this discussion launches British Beauty Week in the UK. So go to the British Beauty Council website. It's on the front page. It's called the Planet Positive Beauty Guide. And what we did was we looked at it through beauty through 4 lenses. So we looked at ingredients, we looked at packaging, we looked at people, and we looked at sourcing. And we have taken the terms and given, as best we can, a good rock solid definition for each one. So if you're thinking about vegan beauty does not mean it's organic. Right? So things like that. There are other places that you can go to, and I use apps. I'm a great fan of apps, and particularly things like Think Dirty app, and I actively put lots of other products when I'm out shopping into the app when I'm using products, because it's a user-generated content. So where there are products in the market, you scan the barcode at the back, and there are some amazing apps now that will tell you that it gives you the score of the product, and then you can say, well, who's behind this brand? You know, I'm not going to name names, but there are some brands out there that have a beautifully wholesome name and look. And that's how they started out. But actually, they've been bought by big corporate bleach companies, for example. So it'll help you really give you the information at your fingertips to start to challenge. So learn about the beauty terms and what they really mean. Start to call out brands. Jessie, you talked about the Green Claims Guide. In the UK, we're so lucky. We're probably the most advanced country in the world. We've got the CMA looking at it and now starting to regulate the industry. We've also got Clearcast. Clearcast is probably something nobody really knows about, but any advert you see on the television has had to go through Clearcast. So you have to show the evidence of what you're claiming. So for Veleda, we're just about to go on television this week with the very first ad for a product that we created in 1926 called Skin Food. It's a natural organic product, and the hoops we've had to jump through, quite rightly, in proving through third-party verification that the claims we're making are right. It's excellent in the UK. But we've still got a way to go. So there are plenty of places out there. The key thing for me, though, is how do we encourage ourselves as an industry to be completely transparent and honest, because we're all trying to be very black and white. So here's my goodness, and I'm going to hide the bad stuff, because every single brand has got some things. We're on a journey. How can we have the courage to change? How can we be really honest about where we are on the journey? And how can we stop being in competition with each other and realize that we have to work together and be honest, and, you know, be producing impact reports and saying, you know, we're only using 50% recycled material in our packaging, but next year it'll be 55% or 60%. But how can we get ourselves into that position? So first and foremost, look on the British Beauty Council website for the Planet Positive Beauty Guide. There's also a really good guide as to where to recycle beauty packaging, because 90% of it is not recycled. We've not talked about that. Use an app on your phone when you're out and about, and actively also upload products into that app. Give good reviews on Trustpilot. By a good review, I mean an honest review, and really encourage ourselves for as an industry to become more honest.
Yeah.
If I can add to what Jane's saying, I mean, we've at the B Corp Beauty Coalition been very inspired by the work that's taken place in the UK and the way in which there is better validation. I think as B Corps, you always have a mindset of continuous improvement and feeling that you're not good enough. It's something that's inherent in every single B Corp I've worked with. And what we want to do as a coalition is maybe take it one step further, which is actually active partnership and collective action. So recognize our status. This is where we are as a coalition, 50 plus B Corps. Publish a white paper and share that better practice, but recognize that it's absolutely not necessarily best practice. And then use that as a springboard from 2023 onwards to pioneer innovation, to actually explore new solutions together that none of us yet have actually initiated, by working together as competitors or cooperators, whatever you want to call it. Because it's kind of like the old African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, are beauty brands keeping up with the evolving shoppers' demands? And when we look at vegan and cruelty-free, if the brand's not meeting the minimum expectations, then they run the risk of falling behind. Sean, do you want to talk a little bit about vegan and cruelty-free, and are they buzzwords?
Yeah, I think, sadly, I think they are, because they're easy to remember and they touch on a sensitive subject. We went vegan and cruelty-free a couple of years ago. The only thing we needed to do was actually remove beeswax from some of our hand creams. Now, the beeswax that we purchased was a byproduct of the honey making industry, and the bees were not harmed in the process. Now, that's a long explanation to defend the role of beeswax, which has a very relevant role in certain cosmetic products. But if you want to claim to be vegan, you simply can't use anything that comes from animals. And therefore, we felt it's necessary to remove it. But then you have to replace it with something else. And where's that coming from? Is it responsibly farmed? Is it synthetic? You know, now, as long as it's vegan, then they're not really asking the question of, so what came in there instead? Similar with parabenes, you know, there's a lot of little parabenes that weren't necessarily bad, but everything's had to be replaced because parabenes have been demonized. Then you've got brands operating in China, where depending on how they're shipping into China, they will be obliged to allow their products exposure to animal testing. Simply because that's the rule of the Chinese government. And we all know it's arguably the biggest beauty market in the world these days. So there are ways around it, but at the same time, not everyone are necessarily taking those ways. So it's an easy promise to hang your products on, but there's a lot of shades of grey between it. And as Jane says, it may well be vegan, but is it organic?
Yeah, exactly. So Jessie, you were talking about journalists calling brands out. Are shoppers doing the same, particularly with vegan and cruelty-free?
Yeah, I definitely think we're seeing shoppers being more vocal, and there's more tools to be vocal now, right? Like brands are very present on social media, and I think, you know, shoppers are right there in the comments, in their DMs, and increasingly talking about these issues, which I think is great. And I totally kind of hear the woes that Sean spoke about. Like these labels are shades of grey. It's not always exactly clear like what exactly the right thing to do is as a brand. So I can see from both sides it can be quite frustrating. Like shoppers want something simple, and they want to call out brands that aren't meeting, you know, their values, but at the same time it's hard as a brand to just bait and switch to meet a certain label. So I think, yeah, I think in a nutshell, and then it gets cascaded up to the press and becomes a bigger story, which is certainly has more impact on brands. But what we're trying to encourage shoppers to do is to firstly have a simple way to check, you know, is the brand meeting a certain standard? Have they given evidence? Have they given verification? And then celebrate that brand for making progress, because this is really, really hard. And then secondly, kind of to Jane's previous point, like we just need to encourage more transparency. We can't expect brands to be perfect. Like perfection in sustainability is just not real. So we have to, as shoppers, say to brands, you know, not just you're not doing this right, but can you tell me what you're doing, even if that's just a small bit of progress to date. So yeah, we're really trying to bang the transparency drum, encouraging shoppers to ask questions, demand more openness, so that, yeah, we can see the progress being made behind the scenes.
Yeah, brilliant. There are lots of emerging trends with sustainable beauty. So like the popularity of carbon offsetting, there's carbon reduction, upcycling, recycled, reusable packaging schemes. So Jessie, what new trends have you seen with sustainable beauty brands?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see a lot of trends coming through the kind of nature of our software product. You know, we've got a module of it which is all about conveying insights to brands and retailers. So what are shoppers engaging with? What types of claims are they clicking on? And then how does that influence the path to purchase? So we see a fantastic amount of data. And it's actually quite reassuring. So we're seeing increased engagement across the board with sustainability claims on product pages versus things like looking at photos of the product or reviews. So that's exciting. You know, it does mean brands are looking for this stuff. But yeah, we are seeing more engagement from shoppers in some of the kind of newer topics when it comes to sustainability. So moving beyond vegan, cruelty-free, recyclable packaging and into, as you said, so yeah, upcycled materials is something we've seen a lot. One of our customers, Graven Skincare, has really kind of made that front and center, and we're seeing really good engagement with that. Carbon emissions is a tricky one. We've massively seen the growth of tree planting and offsets, but we're now starting to see more claims related to reduction of emissions, which I'm very excited about. Lots of the smaller brands are really pioneering on that front. We've been working with the brand Subtract, a new brand, and they're really putting kind of carbon, kind of reducing carbon emissions like front and center, which is great to see. And then the other one is protecting water quality. So I think lots of us don't realize that when we're putting products on our face that contain plastic, that's going down the plug hole and into our seas and oceans. So trying to help highlight to shoppers where their products don't contain any plastic and synthetics that could contaminate oceans has been a big one as well that we've seen. We've done some work with Doers of London, a beauty brand who are really promoting that as part of their products, and we're really encouraging, you know, all brands that can make that claim to do so that we can educate the consumer on the plug hole waste stream, which is maybe not as visible as the recyclable bag in your home.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Thanks, Jessie. And Jane, what proof points are being used by different brands? And can you talk more about some of the interesting shopping engagements?
So I've been really interested to see, I talked about last year, it was about carbon, and this year there's a lot of talk about plastic. I've seen some new brands talking about plastic positive beauty, which I thought was really interesting. So kind of go behind that curiosity. What does that mean? It actually means paying charities in Southeast Asia or in India and so on to collect plastic from the oceans to almost like offset the plastic that's being used. So it's a plastic positive product. So it's very, very creative, because it's actually, I mean, we talked about tree planting, trying to think of innovative and new ways of not just buying a certification, but actually doing good work. So that might be, and you very often see it, like 1% for the planet or 4% for the planet, but work that profit is now going back into the NGO and charity sector to try to clean up. I mean, ideally, the problem would not be there in the first place, let's be honest. And, you know, Jessie, thank you for calling out plastics in formulation, because there is so much inert plastic in formulation, and it is causing a massive problem. To get back to your question though, Lisa, I'm always very nervous of these kind of new trends, because I just feel sometimes, are we demonizing something and not actually saying, look, I'm perfect. We had it with animal testing, cruelty free. So if you didn't have the leaping bunny on your pack, clearly you were testing on animals. Well, testing on animals has actually been banned in Europe for many years now. So there's a lot of miscommunication, and I'll dwell a little bit on animal testing, simply because we know that it is the #1 concern of anybody buying a cosmetic product. Has this been tested on animals? So again, it's a grey area. I call it 50 shades of green. It's very, very difficult to navigate, and I feel very strongly that, if I'm honest, if a brand is calling something out, what is it calling it out to focus on the positive, and what is it not saying? So it's a complicated issue. You know, going on to talk about what's next for the beauty industry, particularly in the UK, and through our work through Beauty Week, I'm so happy, so excited that this week we're actually getting together representatives from the top beauty brands and retailers. We've actually managed to get people to sit in a room in person, which is so exciting, actually in person, to talk about what are the big issues, particularly with regard to plastic and packaging, because we know we're an incredible industry. We are so innovative, we're so tech driven. If we could get the resources of the big retailers, of the really big beauty brands, to all work together on solutions that we could share, for the global good. And that's, you know, as Sean said, together as citizens, it's about people coming together. If we could do that, even if it's just to identify what are the big stumbling blocks, then that is a really good start. So I'm incredibly optimistic. But I think we have to do it together. And I love the idea, Jessie, about the industry coming together to start to talk about the issues of plastic in formulation, so that we're not just harping on about it's all about plastic packaging. I think that would be a wonderful initiative for us to take on board.
Yeah, me too. I totally agree. And then in terms of conscious shoppers, what do they need to be asking from beauty brands, Jessie? You were saying before that we don't want to alienate people.
Yeah, definitely don't want to alienate people. I think there's two things. Firstly, it's important to ask brands that don't talk about sustainability at all to pipe up. So that's what we call green hush rather than green wash, which is not even talking about sustainability in any way. So I think that's the first job, is to ask people to talk about it, be transparent. Second job is to, when brands are being transparent and making claims, is ensuring we ask for them to prove it. So give us evidence, give us verification, so that we don't just need to take your word for it. But I think consumers got a huge role to play. Like, sustainability is still very niche in the industry, and we need a huge shift for it to be front and center with how every single brand and product is differentiating itself. So I really think just the more you can talk about it, the better, really. That would be my biggest advice. It's got to become a core part of popular culture, of new luxury. And so sharing stories from brands or from your own experience, or asking questions, I just think can have a huge impact. You don't need to be a massive influencer to ask a brand a question in the comments. But just make sure it's a constructive question rather than a tear down, because there's a hell of a lot of brands that aren't even saying anything, and that's not helping at all.
Yeah, exactly. So we really need to help brands to help shoppers spot progress as well. Sean, do you have anything to add there? Because I know you were talking before about Sephora.
Well, I didn't want to name them. Yeah, it was interesting. We had a conversation with a very large US beauty retailer earlier this week. And we have what would be claimed to be a sustainable brand here in Copenhagen. And they were like, well, we've got a lot of these small niche, clean beauty brands, but it's a very small niche for us right now. And it's a bit cluttered area. So, you know, they're reluctant to expand this category of beauty, which for them was clearly a kind of tiny part of their overall business. And of course, we're talking about one of the two largest beauty markets in the world and the largest beauty retailer. They're thinking that it's a small niche for a narrow audience profile, and therefore we need to recognize that for only what it is. And I just thought how disappointing that mindset, again, that definition was somewhat backward in its thinking, and is holding all of us back from trying to do the right thing.
Thank you so much. Do any of you have anything to add to this conversation?
I would add, just to build on what Sean said, that the whole beauty industry, including us as citizens who use the product, all have a part to play. So, you know, retailers are gatekeepers. We can all make change, but we have to do it incrementally together. And Sean, your lovely quote, your African proverb, we all have to travel this path together. And I'm really encouraged by getting very clearly competitive brands in the room, and there is no competition. There is just a real willingness to make a significant difference. And I really think, I feel very, very optimistic that we can make a difference. Transparently, we haven't got the answers yet, but collectively together we can. And if there's one thing that I would say is every single one of us really needs to think about how we spend our money and what we spend our money on. I mean, particularly in, you know, we're surrounded by messaging at the moment telling us how bad it's going to get. Well, every single one of us has got power in our bank account and in our purse. Even switching from buying conventional milk to one bottle of organic milk once a week, which might cost an extra £1, which I know is going to be difficult, but that is an act of activism. So buying less, but buying better, and being really considered about where we are putting our money, particularly now it's going to be such a precious resource, is a very powerful thing. And let's not forget that every single one of us has that power.
Yeah.
We in B Corps, we use the phrase "vote with your wallet," vote every day. As voters in democratic countries, we often feel from a political standpoint our vote doesn't count, but it really counts when it comes to cash, because business really responds to the way in which money is being spent. So if citizens spend their money differently, businesses will adapt faster than you can blink.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. It's so true. We've got so much power as citizens with our wallets. Provenance is just so happy to be like one of the tools in this big system change that we need to make. So yeah, I think that power has got to be a kind of key message of this talk. Each of us can contribute.
Absolutely. Well, it's really empowering. It's very inspiring. So thank you so much to all three of you for a really interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.